Hello everybody, we are Alfredo Ortega and he's ANIBAL SACCO from Core Security. We're going to talk about the rootkit. So let's start.
Okay, we'll start with a little bit of history. A few months ago, when we were researching the BIOS for our previous conference, persistent BIOS infection, we found a very interesting thing in there. We found that there was already a rootkit there. So we went a little deeper, and we found that from 2004 to now, the 60% of the BIOS firmware in the notebook suffered an increase of 25 kilobytes. So what is this rootkit?
That's the question.
We found that it is called CompuTrace. It is a kind of anti-theft technology agent by Absolute Corporation. This is a normal option ROM embedded in the Phoenix BIOSes. It comes with a lot of agreements with law enforcement agencies, and it is shipped by default for a lot of vendors. It has agreement with a lot of vendors like HP, Dell, Lenovo, Toshiba, Gateway, Asus, Panasonic, and a few more. So if you have one of these laptops, probably you have this agent inside.
Mm-hmm. You can see here how we found this header when looking at the BIOS code. This is a PCI option ROM. Every PCI card in your computer has the option to install a small initialization code. And we found this option ROM that really doesn't match with any PCI device. You can see here, this is the PCI device of the option ROM, and this device really doesn't exist in the machine. So you see, what is this code? What is the device that is called initialized? No, does not exist any device, because it must be activated by a secret AP, a secret commands to the BIOS. So you can see here that not only this rootkit was already installed, but it was much better than ours. That's very, very surprising. First, this is the basic working of the rootkit. First, it's activated. There are many ways to activate the rootkit because it changes from machine to machines. Once activated, the rootkit has a very small but functional file system drivers inside, so it has the capability to modify file system directly from BIOS without need in the boot stage of the initialization of the machine. So before Windows even start, you already have the agent in your hard disk. Why is that? That is because you can wipe your hard disk, you can reinstall Windows, change the hard disk, and the agent will reinstall. Like every BIOS rootkit is the best characteristic of BIOS rootkit. Once installed, the agent installs itself as a Windows service. Then injects into Internet Explorer and finds home, or call home. Home in this case this is the default server of the BIOS agent. It's very particular URL, and this is very interesting. The protocol used is a RPC-like over plain HTTP. Is pretty insecure, in fact. This is one of the issues that we found. So it's interesting that this rootkit even has the capability to bypass BitLocker. Of course, you need the passwords, the keys for the BitLocker in Windows Vista, but it really works with Windows Vista. You can see that this doesn't work for Linux yet, so that is good. This is the inner worker of the agent. You can see that it's a multi-stage agent, like many malicious code nowadays. Of course, this is not malicious, but it's a multi-stage nonetheless. We have the first stage is contained the PCA header, the routines for initialization of memory. This is protected memory manager. And then has a call to unload from memory, so you really can't see this agent memory. That is why you really can't see it, not even in DOS, because it just unloads from memory using common BIOS routines. The second stage is an installation module here as the file system drivers. It just detects the hard drivers, detects the partitions. I'm talking about this, and it just dump a file in the hard disk in the Windows installation. I even changed some files of the Windows installation, the self-healing of Windows, because it changed many systems inside Windows. And then we have the final agent. This is a Windows plain application, Wine32 application that is the service itself. It installs a service and injects a thread into Internet Explorer, and at the first run calls to the URL that we showed before. Of course, this agent has configuration blocks because it's very configurable. You can change, you can redirect the default server, and this is one of the main issues of this talk. You can redirect this to whatever you want.
Okay, before talking about the problems we found here, yes, please.
Basically, this is an option ROM.
Yes.
So how it detects the operating system is loading or has finished loading in order to drop the file to the file system?
It doesn't need it directly from BIOS. Right, it have a file system driver, so when it just the machine is booting, the option ROM runs, detects the hard disk, detects the partitions, detects Windows, and drop directly the agent inside the Windows directory, even before the machine is booted.
I was going to add something that would make a clearer image of how it happens. Computerize is just a normal piece of software. It's also called a LoJack for laptops. So you can go buy the CD-ROM, install the software, and it offers an RPC server, and it connects to Absolute every 15 minutes, I think. Mm-hmm. So the stuff in the BIOS is offering some kind of persistency method. So if once you have installed Computerize, if the hard drive is formatted or replaced, then the BIOS drop the Computerize again.
Because this modification happens before boot, so Windows don't need to be running, in fact. This is the cool thing of BIOS Rootkit. It just doesn't need to run to boot the operating system, and it's very fast.
Actually, it comes with an NTFS driver code completely in 16-bit.
Yes, in assembly. It's amazing, in fact. It's in 4 kilobytes. NTFS, a functional NTFS driver is incredible, in fact. We can't believe it when we see it.
Well, we found a lot of problems in this implementation, at least. There is a huge privacy risk because there is any type of authentication in it. It is just, it has some sort of encryption that is simply XOR with 1 byte, so it doesn't have any kind of authentication. Mm-hmm. As I said before, anyone could activate it with enough privilege because it is activated with a normal piece of software. It can even be activated through a binary update or a remote exploit. It's just a piece of software that modifies the DMI strings, or it does calls to SMBIOS to activate the BIOS stub. Then, because it uses the configuration block that is residing in a few different places, anyone who can access that configuration block can modify its behavior. In the same way, anyone can deactivate it. And one of the more creepy things with Computerize is that is whitelisted by almost all antiviruses that we tested.
Yes, this is a way the best way to make your software stealed is to call the antivirus interested and say, please don't detect me. They say they did that, and so no antivirus can detect this agent. Of course, if not, if some antivirus detected, the anti-theft technology will not work.
Well, there are more problems. As Alfred said before, Computerized tries to connect directly to an URL instead of an IP. So basically, you can modify the host file to make it point to any IP you want, like localhost. So you are deactivating it or redirecting it to any place you want. You also can change the configuration block, as Alfred is showing there. Actually, this is a configuration block unpacked, but as we said before, it's just an XOR with 1 byte. So you can modify that configuration block to make it point wherever you want.
Well, as every complex software, there are many issues. One of the issues is you can change the redirect the file server to whatever you want. One other of the issues is unauthenticated BIOS code execution, because the agent must be very small. Some BIOS doesn't have enough space, so many notebooks ship with a stub agent. We can show it here. Don't worry if you can read it. Is to show this is the whole agent, the complete agent. So it's very, very small, because the only thing that it does is to load data from the hard disk, in this part here, then checks for some headers here, and here's a Series C 16-bit checks, and then just execute. So, of course, it's a first stage. Load data from the hard disk, because it's not enough space in the BIOS, and execute. So that is okay, except that there is no authentication. There is no space for authentication. So anybody can put data in the hard disk, and this piece of code, when activated, will load it. So this code is signed in many notebooks. So if you signed a code that just load data and executed, you basically didn't say anything. You basically don't have any kind of authentication. Anybody can put data in the hard disk, and code will be executed in the BIOS. So it's unauthenticated BIOS code execution. We found this code in, for example, this notebook, but there are many others. In fact, if you look at the patent application, there's a complete explanation of the working of this agent. The problem is there is no enough space in BIOS. So the guys just forget about authentication, and that is the main problem. Well, so how you can detect it? In fact, this rootkit or agent, it doesn't try very hard to hide itself. You can see, if you have installed it, you can see 2 files. You can see one of these files. This is for the normal agent without BIOS support. And this one is for the BIOS persistent agent. Basically, the function is the same. The only difference is that this file is placed by the BIOS, and this file is placed by an executable that you can download for internet. The funny thing is there is a free download from Absolute. You can get it for free and as a demonstration, but the agent is complete. The Windows service is called Remote Procedural Net. Now, this service is very similar to another Windows service, so it's very easy to confuse with the original Windows service, but it doesn't have any description. You can see, you can realize from this. Also, of course, if your machine has made connection to searchnamequery.com, it's not a search engine or something like that. It's the computerized default server, reporting server. We also made a computerized option from dumper. We say you can't dump from memories. You need a tool to read directly from the flash chip. We're gonna release in a few days, so everybody can dump and analyze this agent.
Okay, so if you see that you have a computerized running on your machine, you would like to deactivate it because you have the right to do it. So there are a few ways to do it. As we said before, you can change the host file to make it point wherever you want. You can modify the BIOS, as we said in our previous talk. persistent BIOS infection, but just on unsigned BIOSes.
Just it's a complete a module BIOS. So it's pretty easy to eliminate from the BIOS if you can modify if the BIOS is not signaled, because it's a module that you can erase. In fact, there is a website that details how to do it. It's very risky because you can break your notebook if you fail. So we don't recommend this way to erase it.
The configuration block that we talked about before, it is in a few places, like the registry, hard disk, and the BIOS. So you can modify any of that configuration block to deactivate it, making it point to localhost, for example. And you can even modify the NVRAM to deactivate it directly from the directly the stuff in the BIOS, and then you should format do a full format of the hard drive, because if it's already installed, it will be running independent of the BIOS stuff. Actually, we managed to do this, modifying the NVRAM to deactivate it using race condition in a tool from Dell.
Yes, this is only we tested on a Dell and a specific model of the computer, and it worked. So maybe it's not a generic way to deactivate the rootkit, but it's a way to show that you can be deactivated or activated only by software.
Well, this is very interesting because we found that there is not a new technology. The first patent talking about computerized is registered in 1998 by Absolute, and it has a lot of interesting, like a feature to use the modem to do phone calls directly through the modem, and support for DOS. So it wasn't implemented in that time, but I think that is a very, very important feature for this kind of technology.
Yes, it supports DOS, and well, it's very creepy because the agent goes directly from the BIOS. Before Windows boots, it's already calling to a phone line. So that was the past. So what is the future? Computerized agent, in fact, is a very old technology. It was, how we said, it was first installed in our notebooks in 2004. So there are new software for this. Phoenix is shipping his new anti-theft technology called FileSafe. FileSafe runs completely inside system management mode. This is a hot topic now. There are many rootkits that are coming out that runs inside system management mode. But Phoenix already has a product that works and can wipe your hard disk directly from system management mode. This is completely operating system independent. No matter if you run Linux or BSD or whatever you want, you can be tracked, and you can remotely disable or format your hard disk. Of course, it had very cool things like GPS tracking. I'm sorry, and well, this is a very cool thing that is called safe. So it is sure feels more safe at least. Intel, of course, has its own anti-theft technology. Is very cool technology that it works even when your notebook is turned off. Of course, not completely turned off. It must be sleep. It doesn't work without power because it uses the secondary AMT processor. So it doesn't even need a CPU to run. And it can also be wipe the hard disk and disable remotely your notebook. This is present in all vPro notebooks enabled. There are also many other applications residing in BIOS. BIOS is a very arcane and dark thing, and nobody look into it. But there are many software places there with nobody check for vulnerabilities. So the good things is that the new technologies already have strong authentication. So you don't have the problem of anybody activating this stuff and wiping or reading your software remotely. only Phoenix and Intel can do it. Now, if you are okay with this is okay for us, but I really don't feel safe with a remotely processed call installed in my notebook. But really you can choose because every notebook have it. And that's it. This was a turbo talk. We need to do more research. This is a very unexplored area of computer security. Nobody is looking in the BIOS. Most researchers looking in the BIOS work for Phoenix, so they will not release any vulnerabilities. There is an option that is core boot. A computer is free and open source BIOS, but core boot doesn't support any notebook to this day, so it really is not an option. Basically, that's it. We must enforce good authentication and good security practice in BIOS also. If you have any question, that was. Yeah.
And you found this when you were looking into rootkits to install in BIOS, right?
Yes. We were trying to install our rootkit.
Okay, so you found this.
Mm-hmm.
You try to subvert this for your own purposes?
Yes, exactly.
Actually, as we said before, you can change, the easiest way to do it is you can change the host file to make it point to any IP you want.
You
So,
replace that loader, I mean, I don't know how to call it, the incomplete BIOS rootkit, the one that loads a file
Yes.
on the hard disk. Would you be able to replace that file
Mm-hmm.
with something from your own?
Yes, when this drop in the agent drop in the hard disk is a first state agent, it has a remote procedure call, so we must replace the URL pointed to our malicious server, and the server we can just command the agent to do a create file and execute, and we just. That's a really it's a really green research. We are really completely sure that there is a completely unauthenticated remote procedure car, but we are analyzing it, and it's really there are no place for authentication.
and actually, you don't need to replace that stuff because once it establishes the connection, you can send DLLs and you can execute anything you want to the service.
Now, the problem is we can do all this and the antivirus will never detect us because it's whitelisted. We don't modify the agent. We modify only the configuration. So the antivirus is no way to tell if it's our agent or the true anti-theft agent. So if the antivirus starts detecting this agent, it will shut down the anti-theft service. And if not, it will allow some malware to do everything.
By default installed on these machines or after you close software? So how you can
It's installed.
The question is, we try to download like BIOS updates to check if the BIOS updates is already installed.
It's installed by default. Sorry, it's installed in every notebook we have, but deactivated in most notebooks. It comes with the BIOS. And in fact, it comes with the BIOS.
Download a BIOS update, you also have it.
Yes. And in fact, you really doesn't have an option to not have it. If there are no specifically BIOS version that doesn't have this rootkit. So the only choice is to deactivate it.
But the activation is through a piece of software, so it's easily.
It would be nice to have a BIOS without this. In fact, there's many more BIOS have an option to deactivate this computerized agent. But as we show it, we don't have time to show it here, but this option can be overridden very simply.
We don't care if it's signed or not because we
Downloaded the update.
yes, and some BIOS is signed in and some not. That depends on the BIOS vendor.
When CompuTrace is activated, how often is it badly wrong?
every 15 minutes.
Yes, at first every 15 minutes and then even 1 hour.
So the obvious attack here is that if you're at a victim's notebook and they have this installed and activated, all you need to do is edit the host's file and point to your server.
Yes.
That is the easiest way, but
Yes, that is not persistent.
Somebody or the management of years, just like days. Afterwards, he will survive. He's going to survive anyway.
Yeah, that modification will not survive. That's true.
In fact, you do it by, if you had access to subvert the DNS
Of course, also you can do that. You can do a lot of things. It is a very huge security hole places directly in your BIOS. The bad thing is that you can replace the hard disk and the agent will self-install again. That's a BIOS persistent agent.
Basically, concentrated a lot of research for you guys.
Yeah. So, well,
Yeah, we have 5 minutes. Yes?
So you said it was deactivated by default, or something was activated?
It is deactivated as an option in the BIOS setup, but it's activated through software. So
a malware can activate it.
that doesn't mean that you need physical access to the machine, in fact.
Yes, it comes deactivated. There are cases that people buying notebooks second hand and it comes with computers activated. They really can deactivate it. And Mary, you search my forum ranting about this issue.
Yes, this ANIBAL rootkit that you're talking about, you say it can be deactivated by default. How then is it activated? Is there a way that you're able to activate on your
Because
your own.
you have like someone else?
because the activation or the deactivation are just the modification of DMI strings or SM BIOS tokens.
Yes.
So you can do it through with physical access through the BIOS setup, or you can do it with a piece of software.
Yes, BIOS can be configured.
Malware that actually is activating this?
No.
No, but we have found
We find very suspicious things like people.
there are people in forums talking about
This file.
computer activated by itself.
I say, what is this file RPC net X that I erase it and then just reappears? What is happening? That is because they have computers installed. Yes, they use very BIOS configuration things like system management BIOS. It's the same configuration that you can shut down your COM ports or shut down your network card, where there is a hidden option to activate the rootkit. Of course, you can do it by yourself, but the software can do it. Computers, you just buy the service and they just activate it via software. Yeah.
So basically, you're telling us that manufacturers of laptops are putting a rootkit by default on our laptops.
Yes, they don't call it a rootkit, I think. They call it an anti-theft agent, but yes, they are.
Obviously, I think, did you query the manufacturers, why they put it in, and what is their answer?
Yes, Core Security, I think they are in talks with Dell and Absolute about a month ago, and they are talking about the issue like any other vulnerability that Core Security detects. But Dell only. And I don't know if they are talking with another manufacturers.
So basically, they do something without telling us.
But I didn't know.
Well, you can easily go back to the manufacturer.
This is not the only thing that is installed in BIOS without telling you. There are many other software like digital biometric software in the notebook that also installed in BIOS, and you don't know. There are plenty of stuff in BIOS.
It's not documented.
Mm-hmm.
What about fixed?
Well, we don't know. Don't have a date for you. Sorry. Yeah.
You mentioned that the BIOS code has a file system driver that's BCTFS.
Mhm.
Imagine if you were running Linux with one of the various flavors of file system, it would eventually.
Will not work.
It just works over Windows.
Mm-hmm. Like you use Linux or BSD, you are safe for now, because file safe it runs in system management mode and it doesn't care about the file system. So it is only for Windows for now.
And, last question.
Regarding the question of the gentleman order, I'm a course CTO, and with regards to these issues, CERT has been notified, so they are coordinating communications with all the manufacturers. One of the manufacturers has been notified as well as Absolutely.
Okay, well, we run out of time. As you can download the slides and the white paper, so mail us if you have
And
any
the
other
tool
question.
to dump it and see if you
Cost.
have computerized,
We
but
dump
you
it,
have.
we analyze it, we control it, and now you can too. Thank you very much.